You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
Archangels, ghosts, and Bigfoot. Oh my. It's just another night for Supernatural Girlz. Real stories, real answers to life's biggest supernatural mysteries. And now for another exciting interview with paranormal experts from this world and others. Here's your host, paranormal researcher Patricia Baker, on the one, the only Supernatural Girlz.
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of Supernatural Girlz. I am your host, Patricia Baker, and I'm here with my co-host, numerologist, PK. Hi, PK. How are you tonight?
Absolutely fabulous. I am just chomping at the bit to get a chance to talk with Larry. If this is just so exciting.
This is an exciting show that we have planned tonight. Larry Holcombe has generously offered to come on our show with his incredible book. My God, we were both just talking about it. We couldn't put it down. The Presidents and UFOs. Oh my gosh. Look, everybody in the audience, you got to run out and you got to get this book. It is terrific. It's filled with excellent information. We're going to be talking about all of this stuff tonight. We'll be taking calls from the audience and taking questions from people in the chat room. Hey, if you want to call in, here's the number. It's 888-919-2355. And again, that's 888-919-2355. Now, when you call in to ask a question, do remember to turn your sound all the way off so we don't get any feedback and we can hear you loud and clear. But this is going to be one exciting show, right, PK?
Oh, not a doubt in my mind. I'm so excited about it all. I couldn't put the book down. Could not put it down.
Yes, it's excellent. He's done an incredible job. But let's talk a little bit about paranormal news. Now, I went looking for some UFO stories, and believe me, UFOs in the news today are not hard to find. There's a lot of sightings going on. Did you see all of those sightings that I sent you today?
Yes, I did.
Oh, my gosh. Well, this one really caught my eye. It was a massive alien spacecraft around the size of the U.S. state of Idaho. And it was spotted near the sun by ufologists in recent NASA pictures. They say the object definitely has a structure. So this is not just a light in the sky up there, it's a structure. And they're saying that every time they ask NASA about these UFOs they're seeing, they get ignored. I wonder why. We're going to find out when we talk to Larry Holcombe, our guest, aren't we?
That's for sure. They don't like us to know anything. And isn't it wonderful that we've got people like Larry that's bringing it all out in the open for the rest of us to understand?
That's right. Thank God for people like Larry. We do need to know. We should know all about this. It shouldn't be kept from us. Now, there was another photograph I sent you, and I got to put this up on our website because it made me laugh out loud. The newscasters in South America. Did you see that one?
I got a chance to look at it, but I didn't get a chance to thoroughly go over it.
Well, it's funny because they're facing each other and they're talking about the news, and right in the background is this huge UFO, a ship, right behind them. It was hilarious. Made me laugh out loud. So I'm going to have to post that one for everybody to see. That was just too good. Too good. But next week, well, actually, let me start with tomorrow night because we have a two-part show we are participating in with another host from Inception Radio Network, and that is Renee Barnett, who is the host of Night Vision Radio. It's a great show. It's on every Thursday night. Now, tomorrow night, she's going to kick off the first part in our series on the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. Mm-hmm. Now, you may wonder why two paranormal shows are doing a story on this, and it's because this story, besides that it ripped our hearts out, we got to tell you, it's an incredibly difficult story to report on because of the tragic circumstances. However, it is filled with paranormal events. And so Renee is going to come on her show tomorrow night. She's got her guests lined up that were involved in the initial investigation. And Renee herself is one of the very few people who knows all of the intimate details about the paranormal events involving the Oklahoma Girl Scout murder. So don't miss it. That's going to be part 1 tomorrow night on Inception Radio Network. Now, next week, PK and I will be back with part 2, and we will have Renee Barnett on the show with us, Michael Bastine, a Native American medicine man, and also psychic medium George Lugo. So we're going to take this in a little bit of a different direction. We're going to find out what's underneath all of these events. These are 2 shows. You just make sure you listen. They're going to be incredible. This is just the ultimate battle between the light and the darkness.
That's for sure. That is for sure. It's incredible to think that all of this is going to be brought together with the 2 parts that we're going to put out.
Oh, yeah. It's really going to be great because Renee is going to go through the actual facts of the case, what happened with the investigators she's bringing on her show tomorrow night, and then we're going to bring in the psychic elements with George and also the Native American medicine aspect with Michael Bastine, and Renee will be here with us also to fill in the rest of the details about this case. It's going to be a blockbuster, so be sure to tune into both shows, everybody. Now, let's see. We've got numbers, PK.
Yes.
What are saying to us?
Well, what's going to happen tomorrow is it's going to be about partnerships, relationships, and sensitivity. The month is all about family situations, our pets, things of that nature. But tomorrow we're going to be overly sensitive to everything ongoing. Both the day and the month, the numbers of which deal with relationships, partnerships, and marriage, love, divorce, all of that good stuff. So if you're walking on the edge, stay away from your partner for the day. Give yourself a break.
Go out and have lunch with someone.
Yeah. And if you want to really try to make it work, go for the gusto because you're going to have every opportunity to make your side of it known.
Nice. Wow. So, partnerships, here we come. That's going to be all day tomorrow, huh? Oh,
That's
boy.
for sure.
Okay, I got to decide where I'm going to be.
Well, you could come and visit me, but it's a long way for coffee.
It is a long way for coffee, darn it. And I also want to remind everybody to please go to supernaturalgirls.com, sign up for our newsletter, The Fringe Files, so that you can be alerted to all the exciting things that we are doing every single week. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, and be a part of our community. This is the Supernatural Girlz family that you are going to be a part of. If you so desire, we'd love to have you. This is where paranormal is normal. So tonight, as we mentioned, we have just an incredible, we've got an A-lister, let's face it. We got an A-lister guest tonight.
Definitely that.
Oops, I just dropped his beautiful book. Larry Holcombe is with us. He is the author of The Presidents and UFOs. Larry is an investigator, and he is an expert in this field, and we are going to hear all the stuff that we need to hear, and some of the stuff we probably don't want to hear, but it's true. And Larry has dug deep for everybody, and here he is. Larry, welcome to the show.
Well, delighted to be here, ladies. That's quite a build-up. I hope I can hold up to it.
Oh, you will, and then some, I'm sure.
Yes. So, Larry, do tell us, please, and our audience, we all want to know, how did you get involved in this? What started off your journey on the UFO highway?
Well, to tell you that is going to expose my my elder years, but my exposure to flying saucers, as I like to refer to them, was junior in high school. in 1960. So as I said, I'm exposing my age, but that's all right.
You're a youngster.
I read two of Donald Kehoe's books that I got in my high school library. The one thing I loved to do in high school was read. I love literature. That was about the only thing I liked to do, but in high school. But I truly love literature, and I was fascinated with aircraft and the subject of flying saucers had really become very well known in those days, from the late 40s, 50s, and into the 60s. And I was captivated by Kehoe's passion in his writings that the Air Force was deeply involved in the flying saucer issue, which is what it was known as then, and that they were concealing evidence that they had. Kehoe was a retired Marine Corps aviator, retired major Marine Corps aviator, and had been doing freelance writing for a number of publications, one of which was True magazine, which was at those days was primarily a men's magazine. He was called to Washington, or called to New York, by the editor of True magazine, Ken W. Purdy, and Purdy told him that he wanted him to go out and investigate this new flying saucer issue that was making headlines. Had been making headlines around the world. And Kehoe didn't want any parts of it, really. He didn't like the idea, thought it was pure baloney, didn't want to get involved in it, but Purdy convinced him that knowing that he had high-level contacts in the Pentagon, to go out and investigate it and write an article. And so Kehoe reluctantly accepted what Purdy requested. And within a year, he went from a skeptic to a true believer after interviewing numbers of Air Force pilots, people within the Pentagon who had investigated the subject from the old Project Sign, which was the first Air Force investigation of flying saucers, which then evolved into Project Grudge, which was really nothing but a propaganda outfit, propaganda.
Now, was that one of the ones that was kind of covering things up and finding like dumb excuses?
Yeah, Project Sign came about because of Project Grudge came about because Project Sign, the personnel in Project Sign, actually did, in the late 1940s, did investigations into the flying saucer phenomenon, as it was called then. And they ended up, after, I think the thing that sort of pushed them over the cliff was the famous Charles Whited Eastern Airline event over southeastern United States, over Alabama, I think it was. The date of which escapes me, but in any case, that pushed them over the edge, and they wrote an estimate of the situation, which ended up saying that from their research that these objects that were being seen by pilots, military pilots and civilian pilots and airline pilots, most likely were extraterrestrial in origin. Mm-hmm. And this estimate of the situation was passed up like a hot potato through the chain of command in the Pentagon and ended up on General Hoyt Vandenberg's desk.
He must have been thrilled.
And Vandenberg said, in essence, "Hell no, we're not going to do this. This is not going public. Bat it back down and redo it. Take this extraterrestrial information or reference to extraterrestrials out of it. We don't have enough evidence, that's what it is, but we're not going public with this." So that really spelled the demise for Project Sign, which was really the truly only investigative office within the Air Force that did any real true UFO investigations, except for the early years of Project Blue Book and Edward Ruppelt. But
so you found this all very intriguing, as we all have too. It's just an intriguing situation, but then it gets frustrating because in your book, and in other books, but your book especially, there's a mountain of evidence. A mountain, at least one, maybe 10 mountains of evidence that are pointing to the truth that these things are real. They existed. They visited us for many, many years. But something happened with Truman. Can you tell us exactly how this started? Because as I went through the book and PK went through the book, we were amazed to see there were some presidents in the know and some not. But with Truman, he kind of took it out of the government's hands, in the government as we know it, and he put it with another group. Can you tell us what happened there?
The straw that broke the camel's back was in 1952 with the Great Washington Merry-Go-Round, as it's been called. And this is when numbers of UFOs overflew Washington in the restricted airspace over the Capitol and the White House, for that matter, on 2 weekend nights in July. The dates of which were, I think, July 19th and 20th and the 26th and 27th. 2 Saturday nights that went into Sunday mornings where these craft showed up on radar. These objects showed up on radar. Jets were scrambled on the first weekend night. And when they arrived over Washington, the jets arrived over Washington, the objects took off. When the jets went back to their base, the objects returned. And this went on from almost 8 o'clock at night until dawn the next morning. The same thing happened on the next Saturday night into Sunday morning. The difference was jets were scrambled. And at the request of Al Chop, who was Air Force Public Relations, head of Air Force Public Relations at the time, he was in the control tower at Washington National Airport, and he requested jets to be scrambled that second night. When the jets arrived, the objects didn't leave. They stayed there. And one jet had a number of objects, 5 or 6 or 7, however many, started to converge on the jet and surround the jet and close in on it. The pilot really was panicking, and he radioed, "What should I do? What do you want me to do?" Meaning, should I fire on them?
Right.
At that instant, the objects took off. And some of the recorded speeds was at 7,000 miles an hour. Obviously, we didn't have aircraft in those days that could fly 7,000 miles an hour. That prompted President Truman. That made headlines, big headlines, around the world. And that made Truman, who was pretty crusty, as people know, with his language and all, to tell his military aide, Air Force aide, General Landry, just to find out what the hell's going on. Get out there and find out. I want answers. From that, that was a news conference held. Trying to get through this quickly. There was a news conference held, one of the largest news conference the Air Force had held since the Second World War. And General Sanford was in charge of the press conference, and he went through a lot of rigmarole and said a lot of nothing, but ended up by saying that what the radar operators saw, and this was not only Washington National, but Andrews Air Force Base was seeing the same thing on their radars, and they were talking back and forth between Andrews Air Force Base and Washington National Tower.
See, now this is, I think, a perfect example of when people say, well, why don't they land on the White House lawn? Well, they kind of already did. And we have witnesses. We have radar reports from more than one place. And so it has already happened. And yet people still are in the dark. They're saying, well, we don't know if it's real. How could this not be real? In 1952, these flying saucers were going 7,000 miles an hour. And when, as you mentioned, the jets were scrambled, they played a game of cat and mouse. They'd disappear, they'd reappear. I mean, all of these things point to the reality of spaceships, UFOs, little green men. These ships were not from here.
Well, General Sanford said at the end of the conference that they were temperature inversions, which was completely one of the people that came out and said it's absolute stupidity was Dr. James E. McDonald, who's one of my heroes in UFO research. Dr. McDonald was, as you all, I'm sure you all know, was famed atmospheric physicist at the University of Arizona and studied the subject for some 6 years. I think it ended up resulting in his death, but neither here nor there. McDonald said it was ridiculous. The controllers in the tower were incensed that the Air Force put out a report that they, who had the lives of civilians in their hundreds and thousands of civilians in their hands, couldn't tell the difference between a temperature inversion and a hard target. Right. But the press, as they have over and over and over again, bought the story, case closed, and then we get into the Robertson panel, which was a result of this event and ended up saying that UFOs should be debunked to the public. This was all done in secret, that UFOs should be debunked to the public, that the CIA, the intelligence community, and the government should debunk these reports, and civilian groups that are interested in them should be closely monitored. So you've got the beginnings of a real cover-up that continues today and has exploded exponentially.
Well, yes, because I mean, it's where it started with Truman and how he brought this more to a level of high security, and whatever alphabet agencies he decided to involve in this, I don't know, but he certainly did move this many steps closer to the hands of those agencies and away from the presidents. But
well, let me. I skipped over something.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Truman, and this is debated with ufologists, but I believe it's a fact. Truman established a group of people called Majestic 12, MJ-12, which was a group of 6 high-level, the top-notch scientists, and 6 very highly esteemed military field officer, general officers, and admirals. And Majestic 12 was the group that Truman set up to investigate flying saucers or UFOs and report back to the president. That was their charge. That as it said about Truman, the buck stops here. He wanted all information, all UFO, all flying saucer information to be controlled by the president. The president would have absolute control over this information. This moved forward into the Eisenhower administration. But it is my belief, going back to, boy, we got to skip around here a bit, but going back to Roswell, I think we have recovered extraterrestrial craft of some fashion. I personally believe the craft were probes. I think they were expendable probes sent from, if you will, motherships. just like we send probes to the moon or to Mars or to Venus or wherever. I think these were probes, and these probes were expendable. I think they had some type of living being in them that was probably part of the craft. These were engineered beings. These were living beings, but they were engineered beings. And can I back that up with hard fact? No, but after doing a great deal of research and spending a lot of time in presidential libraries, I think that's the most logical answer. And these beings and the probes that they were in, or that they were part of, were expendable. That's why they weren't the people that were handling them, that were controlling them, didn't come and pick them up. I mean, perhaps they wanted us to have them. Perhaps it was the beginning of a long term of disclosure. I don't know. That's pure speculation. But I think these were expendable probes, and
Interesting.
And I think I think we had this material, and I think this material was turned over to the intelligence community, and from there to the military-industrial complex for study. And I think a great deal of money was given to the study of these artifacts. And where you have a lot of money, you start amassing a lot of power. And I think that in the later years of the Eisenhower administration, the power that Truman envisioned the president having over this issue was wrenched away from the White House and the president, and taken into the hands of the intelligence community, and at the very highest levels, the military-industrial complex. And I think that's where it's gone today. I think today presidents know really very little about the subject. I think that it's controlled deep within the black operations of our government and the intelligence community, and there are very few people, I call them the keepers of the secret, who make the decision on what presidents know and what presidents don't know, depending on how they view the particular person, how they view the person that's occupying the White House, and how much he or she will be briefed on this subject. So that's, in a nutshell, I think, where we are.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think that's a really good assessment of what's happening. And at the same time, it's a little bit disconcerting that so much of this is in the hands of people who are not accountable to us as citizens. And also, you must be talking about security clearances that go far above the president's head. I've heard there's like 35 security clearances that go above the president. Have you heard that?
Yeah, top secret clearance is really nothing. It's you've got security clearances of all types that are above top secret. Mm-hmm. We hear of top secret ultra. We hear of all sorts of levels, but there are many levels above top secret that involve various things, be they experimental aircraft, such as the stealth aircraft that was secret for 20 years. People say that the government can't keep secrets. That's baloney. The government may not be able to keep political secrets, mm-hmm. but they can very well keep secrets that involve national security and national defense, and that's two different things altogether. Political secrets are just that. They are politicians are blabbermouths.
True.
And bureaucrats deep within the government are very accustomed to keeping secrets, as are the very high-level officials of corporations that operate within the military-industrial complex.
Oh, yeah, we've got to go to a commercial break, Larry. But again, everybody, you're listening to Supernatural Girlz Radio with your host, that's me, Patricia Baker, and my co-host, PK, and our incredible guest tonight, Larry Holcombe, who's the author of Presidents and UFOs. Everybody stay tuned. We will be right back. Welcome back, everyone. You are listening to Supernatural Girlz Radio. I'm your host, Patricia Baker. I'm here with my co-host, PK, and our guest tonight, the fascinating Larry Holcombe, who is the author of a terrific book. If you don't have it, you got to get a copy. You'll be like we were. We couldn't put it down. The Presidents and UFOs, A Secret History from FDR to Obama. And Larry, you got some big news that we want to have you share with our audience tonight about your book. It was just optioned for a movie.
Well, yeah, I appreciate you asking. Yes, I just got final word from my agent this afternoon that the deal is done and signed and sealed, and they're sending me the documents to sign. Sony Pictures has optioned my book.
Congratulations. That is so exciting. And so many people are going to want to see this movie because, again, we're all hungry for the real facts. We want to know what's going on. And you've put them all together beautifully in your book. So now people will get to watch it as well. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. We're pretty excited about it. I don't know now what Sony's going to do with it. They have the option, and I understand that I have from my agent that they already their option started actually about 6 weeks ago, and that they are looking for screenwriters. So whether it's going to be an actual film made, whether it will be a miniseries for television, such as a miniseries on HBO, I don't know. There are all sorts of
there's all kinds of broadcast outlets today for something like this, but I'll tell you what, wherever they decide to put this, it's going to be watched by millions of
That's for sure. It's so intriguing. It's just incredible to think all of this is taking place while we're alive.
Yes.
Well, I tried to, in writing the book, I wanted to appeal, or I wanted to direct the book to, you all have read the book, and you know that I call folks the casual observer, and that is the person that has an interest in the subject. And I think that there's a huge amount of folks around the world that have an interest in the subject, but really know very little about it. They only know some of the silly stuff that you see on television, some of the ridiculous things that you see, some of these documentaries that come out and that just drive me crazy because they are inaccurate. Their facts are not accurate, and they are making assumptions that they shouldn't be making. But I wanted a book that would sort of be a textbook 101, if you would, for modern day ufology, from the 1940s, from the Roosevelt era forward, and what really went on behind the scenes, what really went on within the Air Force, and how much discord there was, for instance, as you all read in the book, within the Air Force in the 1940s and the 1950s, and how many blows the Air Force took over and over again when they would come out and make statements of fact that turned out to be blatant lies. And let me make it clear here to all the listeners that I have the greatest respect in the world for the military. I really do. And the Air Force. I think the Air Force is marvelous branch of service, and all of the people in the service, Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, they all do a fantastic job, and so many have given their lives for our country. But I think in the Air Force and the government's handling of the UFO issue, their handling of it has been idiotic and despicable.
We agree with you, because they point fingers at people who are highly trained, at people who work on radar, as you mentioned, every day, and they make them look or sound stupid, like they don't know what they're talking about. Nothing could be further from the truth. They are disparaging to abductees also. They go on a big campaign against these people who have suffered through abductions. And all of this I agree. We agree. This is despicable. This is not fair treatment of the American public.
I don't know. Abduction is not my strong suit. My background really involves the study of flying saucers and UFOs, and not even so much of who occupies them, but just the craft themselves and what they do. And because you have to specialize in an area. We're talking about, when you talk about UFOs, you're talking about a subject that has so many roots and branches running from it that we could spend hours discussing why the media doesn't cover it properly, who the debunkers are and why they debunk it, and so on and so forth. It goes on forever and ever. So you have to focus on one thing. But abductions is a very important part of it. And I think the abductees have been treated in many cases terribly. I am good friends with Kathleen Martin, who is head of MUFON's abduction division, if you will. I'm sure that's not Kathy's exact title, but that's what she's in charge of.
She was on our show, Larry. She was delightful and very.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
I was just with Kathy and Stan Friedman at Roswell a couple of weeks ago, and Kathy, if you know the book, helped me out greatly in the abduction chapter, because I don't know abductions. But I thought that they were so important, the topic was so important, that it needed to be covered in my book. And I asked Kathy to include, if she would help me with it, which she did. She sent me a paper that she had written previously. She could not get into it actively then, because she was just, her new book with Denise Stoner had just been released, and she was touring around the country promoting that book. But she did a great deal for me, and I'm indebted to Kathy. And she's a fine person and a delightful person. And
and she explains it very well in that chapter in your book. It's a very well written chapter on abduction, and it just goes through a lot of different things about it. But certainly, this is part and parcel, as you mentioned, of a huge area. And it's, again, I just want to urge everybody to buy your book. Again, it's The Presidents and UFOs, A Secret History from FDR to Obama, because it is very clear. You have written a book that is so clear and so easy to read and understand how things progressed the way they did. And again, this is based on as much information as you could garner in this whole just long history of secrecy. You did a great job, but there's still a lot of secrets. Now, one of the things I want to ask you, Larry, is, why? Why do they feel they have to keep it secret from the American public? What's your opinion on that?
Technology. In one word, technology. There's everybody's got a theory about it, that the world economy would collapse, religion would collapse. I don't buy into that. What Truman did after the Second World War, as I stated in the book, was, I think, perfectly reasonable. We were a country, or we were a world that was torn apart by a great world war. We had, 50 million people died. 1,600 cities were destroyed. The fabric of the population of the world, not only our country but the world, was very fragile. And to come out and say that there are mystery craft that fly in and out of our airspace and our atmosphere at will, and we can't do anything about them, that would be a very smart thing to do. So I think what Truman did in concealing it then was proper. I think that as time went on and we got into the atomic age and people lived under the fear of mass destruction or mutually assured destruction, which was called MAD, we saw the advances in space and people landing on the moon, we became a more sophisticated people. So today, I think that people, if the news came out and said, well, yeah, it's been proven that we have been visited by extraterrestrial visitors, people would say, gee, that's really something. Then they'd go about their lives as
their business, sure.
And I think that we've become that sophisticated. So to go back to your original question, why? Because we have gotten artifacts that lead to great advances in technology, and we don't want to share that with anybody, friend or foe. Other countries have also, I think, gotten this technology. I think the Russians have gotten it. The English have gotten it. Probably South American countries, China. They've had crashes, reported crashes. I think that they all have it, and I think that's why it has been concealed for so long. Although I see some of these countries starting to open up, like France with that Cometa report, becoming more open. But yet they say the United States standing alone like this stupid ostrich with its head stuck in the sand.
But we do
just
it so
denying,
well.
denying everything.
Yeah, and here's my question to you about that. And this is where the abductees come into play. Do you believe from the research you've done that it's pointing in the direction that a deal was made for extraterrestrials to take human subjects at will and return them as they saw fit? I mean, was there a deal made like that, do you think?
Let me say that that's in my dubious file. I've done a lot of research into President Eisenhower's supposed meeting with extraterrestrials in 1954 at the old Muroc Air Force Base, which is now Edwards Air Force Base, while vacationing in Palm Springs. I don't buy into that story for a couple of reasons. First of all, it said that he was out of the public view for 8 hours, or from 8 o'clock that night until he went to church at 9 o'clock the next morning. He had played golf that day with Ben Hogan and had lunch. I think at the Burning Tree, not the Burning Tree Club, but anyway, it doesn't make any difference. He'd had lunch in Palm Springs with the golfers, and it's very hard for me to believe. First of all, they said he was out of sight of the public, and it had chipped a tooth eating fried chicken and had to have emergency dental work done late that night. Well, I don't find anything particularly unusual about the President of the United States being out of the public view from 8 o'clock one night until 9 o'clock the next morning when he went to church. I mean, my God, they don't have television cameras in the president's bedroom to watch him all night long. So that instance is appeal, and the fact that he played golf with some famous golfers, and then flew to Muroc and had a meeting with extraterrestrials, and then came back and went to church the next morning, and then had a big reception that evening. I just don't buy that story. However, in 1955, he was on a quail hunting trip, went on a quail hunting trip to Georgia, and in February of 1955, I think it was, and his press secretary Haggerty said he came down with James Haggerty said he came down with the sniffles, and so he'd be just having hot toddies with Mamie and her mother and playing Scrabble and what have you, and what have you. So he was under public view for 48 hours. Well, it's perfectly reasonable to think that he could have gotten on Columbine 3, his plane, and flown to boy, my old mind is escaping me.
But so the
Air Force Base in New Mexico. Anyway, Holloman Air Force Base.
That deal was made. So you don't think that there was a deal made to allow ETs to take people?
Let me say this. I think that he did go to Holloman Air Force Base secretly.
Okay.
And there are reports that there were flying discs, very, I think, substantial reports, very, very good reports, that there were one or two or more flying discs that showed up at Holloman Air Force Base, and I think Eisenhower was there, and some very strange things happened. His plane landed on the runway and turned around and stopped on the runway, which in essence closed the runway while he was there. He didn't taxi to the tarmac. And there were reports that there were flying discs there. Now, there are people that say that he got out of his plane and walked across the runway and got into this UFO and had a meeting. Ladies, that stretches my belief a bit that the Secret Service would let the President of the United States walk out of an airplane and get into a flying saucer from wherever that could whisk him off to goodness knows where. That stretches the story a bit for me. However, I think that he may have met with extraterrestrials, or he may have been there to view craft that were developed, that were extraterrestrial craft that were flown by our own test pilots, or had been craft that had been back engineered and built. So did he make a treaty? I don't know. I mean, how do you make a treaty with extraterrestrials? I mean, who can enforce it?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's what we've heard from some of our other guests, exactly that it was, if there was a treaty, it was unenforceable. And the agreement to take people and wipe their memories of the event or whatever, it just wasn't happening the way they said it was happening or was going to happen. And it created a lot of issues that the military or the alphabet agencies felt they had to clean up. So you see, here's the way I think about this. The technology part of this, I understand what you're saying. And certainly, I think most people could understand that we want this technology for ourselves. We don't want to share it with anybody. So certainly can understand secrecy. However, if there was some agreement made that in return, you get to take people and do whatever you want to them, I think, and this is just my opinion, but I think that people would be pretty upset about that. They would feel that their government turned on them, that the government didn't protect them. All of those things I could see leading to a massive uprising. That I could see. So,
and the reason that the government wants to continue to contain to continue to cover this story up with such deep secrecy, because if it was revealed, it would be so detrimental to the government. And I agree with you that the reason that we continue, the United States continues, as I said, to bury its head like the stupid ostrich, is because to reveal what they really know and what is really known deep within the recesses of our government would be so damning to the government, so hurtful for what they've done in the past, that they can't. They can't let the truth out. I think that's a very real possibility, and there's no question in my mind that many laws have been broken in this subject. Possibly murders created. Murders has happened, and although a lot of people that are involved in those events in past history have long since gone, it would still reflect terribly, negatively on our government, which has a lot of things reflecting negatively on it today.
Oh, yes.
So
that is sure.
I think that I think the disclosure. Stephen Bassett, who I respect highly, believes disclosure is imminent. I think Steve is a very smart fellow, but I don't agree with him. I don't think disclosure is imminent, because I think it would be too, what should I say, too hurtful to the government.
There would be no benefit to them to reveal any of this. What's the benefit to them? I mean, certainly be a benefit to all of us, but we're not even considered.
Well, that's exactly right, and that's a point I bring up in many of my interviews that people ask. What do you think about disclosure? Of a presidential disclosure. If the presidents know anything, what would be the benefit in them telling?
Right.
It would be the benefit is practically nil, and the negatives would be extremely high.
That's true.
So why even come close to it? Stay away from it. Don't tell me about it.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Again, the benefit would be to us and as citizens to know the truth. It would not be to the government to divulge any of that. So, unfortunately, we're in an us or them situation with this issue and others. And it's very unfortunate, I think, because any place where there's secrecy, where these things are being hidden, it's really not for our benefit. Let's face it. It's not for our benefit.
No, it's not. They may be people that say that it is, but no, I don't think it is.
No, it really isn't. Now, I've got a lot of questions that are backing up here in the chat room, but I'm just enjoying talking to you so much, Larry. I haven't given them a chance. So here's one quick question, if we can answer before the break. Somebody has written in, Neutron is the name, and Neutron says, was the UFO phenomenon responsible for the contention and ongoing power struggles between the Navy, Army, and later the Air Force?
In some respects, yes, it was, especially in the early years. In the 40s and 50s, there was a great deal of discord, not only within the Air Force, but within the Navy. The Navy got very upset with the Air Force over a couple of events, which I won't go into. But the Navy finally said, "Nuts! We'll take this up. We have an Office of Naval Intelligence. We'll take this subject on ourselves." And I think they did. And I think the Navy today probably knows as much or more about the whole UFO story than the Air Force does. I think the Navy is deeply involved in it. And this goes into the story of undersea UFOs but I think that there's been a great deal of discord within the services, primarily between the Air Force and the Navy.
Interesting. Well, and I've got a piece to share with you that I also learned about the Navy's involvement from Dr. Andrija Puharich, because he said the same thing you did, that the involvement from the Navy's perspective was greater than any of the other agencies. So we're going to talk about that, but right now we've got to take a short break. Everybody, what an exciting show. If you'd like to ask your question in the chat room, feel free to do that. Otherwise, you can call in at 888-919-2355. We'd love to hear from you. We are speaking with Larry Holcombe, who is the author of The Presidents and UFOs. Stay tuned, everybody. You are listening to Supernatural Girlz Radio. We will be right back. Welcome back, everyone. You are listening to Supernatural Girlz Radio. I am your host, Patricia Baker. I'm here with my co-host, PK, and our very exciting guest, Larry Holcombe, who is the author of a terrific book. It is called The Presidents and UFOs, and it was just optioned by Sony Pictures. You will be seeing it on the big screen, or maybe even on HBO. We're not sure yet, but it's going to be out there somewhere. You're going to get to watch it. This book is great. You got to get the book. It's an amazing read, great facts, great information. And Larry, I wanted to ask you also some questions about these great stories that you've reported on, like Nixon and Jackie Gleason. Can you tell us about that?
Well, the the Nixon Gleason story has been around for a long time. I put it in the book because it's there. It exists. Is it true? We have Gleason's ex-wife, Beverly McKittrick Gleason, I think it was, that was writing an article after she and Gleason separated or divorced. And as the story goes, they were still good friends. But she was going to write a book about her life with Gleason. And in the book, she wrote that Gleason, who without question had a great interest in UFOs, or flying saucers, and the paranormal. As a matter of fact, when he died, he donated, or he did donate, but his wife donated some 1,600 volumes of books that he had to the University of Miami Library. I have photographs of Gleason's house in, I think it's Peekskill, New York, before he moved to Miami, that was built in the shape of a flying saucer.
Oh my goodness.
And outbuildings that he called scout ships that were built that looked like flying saucers. He had the architect design them this way because he was so fascinated by the subject. And I've got pictures that someone that read my book had snuck onto the property after Gleason didn't own it any longer, and had taken pictures of the houses and the outbuildings. If I'd had them at the time, they would have been in my book. But anyway,
yeah.
Gleason was very good friends with Richard Nixon. Nixon, to make this as short as I can, Nixon, people look on today as a villain because of Watergate and what have you. But Nixon, in his first term, is extremely popular. And if people remember, he was reelected by almost a historic majority of the popular vote. And the reason being was he had done some dramatic things in foreign affairs. He had opened up relations with China, which had been a closed country. He had established détente with the Russians. Other foreign affairs achievements that probably or arguably made the world a safer place for a while. And if Nixon could have added some level of disclosure to his resume as president, he would have been a historic president. As it was, Watergate reared its ugly head, and Nixon's idea, and in sort of the heart of the book, was the documentary that was made by Robert Emenegger that Nixon was going to use for disclosure. That I think that that's all logical and reasonable because he was such close friends with Jackie Gleason. Jackie Gleason was a strong believer in an extraterrestrial presence and terribly irritated that the government would continue to conceal what it knew about it. And so it's beyond the pale to believe that this man, Gleason, this entertainer, close friends with the President of the United States, would have not have bent Nixon's ear to disclose or some level of disclosure of UFOs or an extraterrestrial presence.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. It really does. I had no idea until I read your book that Jackie Gleason was so interested in the paranormal. He probably would have liked our show. But anyway.
I'm sure he would have.
Yeah. A loyal listener. Maybe on the other side he's listening tonight, but it's just one of those strange stories that really caught my attention that Jackie Gleason may have, we're not sure, as you mentioned in your book, you're not sure if it's true or not, but he may have gotten to see some of the alien bodies that were being kept at Homestead Air Force Base.
Nixon is the one president that could have done this. I believe that because Nixon was vice president under Eisenhower for 8 years, and Eisenhower was deeply involved in this subject. So it's reasonable to think that Nixon was brought into it at some level.
Right.
So, and he had a great interest in it. So the pieces seem to fit. Whether Nixon slipped away from the Secret Service, got in a car and drove over and picked Gleason up and took him to Homestead Air Force Base to show him alien artifacts. We can only go by what his ex-wife says. But it's an interesting story, and there are enough dots that are connectable in this story to make it really quite interesting.
Yeah, I found that to be fascinating. And then his ex-wife also said that it affected Jackie Gleason so profoundly that he started to drink a lot more, and he was very upset that he couldn't eat, and he was very upset that people did not know about this, that there wasn't disclosure. It really bothered him.
It's hard to believe that Gleason could drink more than he did. But
no way.
But I say that I shouldn't have said that because I personally I like Gleason a lot. He was a great entertainer.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, he did have a reputation for dipping his feet quite a bit.
Yes, he did. Well, now, the other story that caught my attention, there's so many in your book, and they're all really intriguing, but the one about Carter, because as you bring out in the book, there are some presidents that have been given more information than others. Now, Carter was briefed by someone called, I believe you called him the Guardian.
No, that was Carter was briefed by George H.W. Bush, who was head of Central Intelligence at that time. And there are a lot of stories about, people say that George H.W. Bush went in and said, "Mr. President, you don't have the need to know for this information." I don't know if those stories are true or not. I don't know why, as I say in the book, that he would have done that. The person you're referring to, what was his name?
Really cool.
But that he briefed. The story is that he briefed Reagan. He briefed. That was the caretaker, I think his name was.
Okay.
That he was called.
I was close. I called
and he briefed Reagan. again, that story is in my dubious file. However, I have listened to it and I've read transcripts of it. And the thing that I find fascinating about it is that it's very Reagan-esque in Reagan's replies. It sounds like Reagan. And you know, all of these documents that I talk about that are not official documents that have been released through FOIA, but documents that are documents that have been leaked. You have to read the documents, and most of them are photocopies. So they're not on original paper. They don't have original inks that you can do forensic testing on and what have you. So you have to read the documents and see if the prose matches the prose that would be written in that particular time frame.
Yeah,
For
you're
instance,
quite a detective when you go through all of this stuff. You've got to put all the pieces together. I know. And again, that's why I'm so impressed by the amount of work you've done to create this book for all of us to read. But I want to go back to Carter for a second, because in the book it's reported, and I've also heard this story elsewhere, that after he was briefed, he went into his office, put his head in his head in his hands, and started sobbing. Now, what in the world was he told? We can only, I guess, imagine what in the world would strike him so deeply that he would just start crying.
Well, that opens up a lot of questions. First of all, did it actually happen? We don't know for sure that it happened. But if it did happen, then it goes back to some people's theory that the reason we are not being told the truth is that the truth is too terrible for the people to know. I don't personally buy that, but I don't discount it either. You know, you've got to have an open mind in the discussions of UFOs and ufologies. You have to have an open mind, but you also have to have a skeptical mind. And so if that story is true, what could be so terrible? Perhaps there is some very sinister background to this UFO story. But the facts don't seem to indicate that, because I think that we have been visited for hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps, pre-biblical times.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And if they wanted to do us harm, they could have done it a long time ago. Now, maybe there are some out there that are not so benevolent, but maybe we are the ancestors. Our ancestors are a race of extraterrestrials that are very benevolent and that look after us and protect us. That's another, that's
a possibility.
That's highly speculative.
Yeah, but I think we have to go down that road because we don't really have the truth from these people directly. But I'm thinking, could Carter have done this? And he seems like he would be the type that something affected him emotionally, he would do something like, he would let it out. He would have an emotional outburst of just sobbing about it. Now,
I think it fits. Yeah, I think it fits the Carter mold. Carter was, he was very religious, Sunday school teacher and what have you, and I could see that this could affect him greatly if that was true. That he would certainly be a president that would fit into that picture where some others wouldn't.
Yes, exactly. Now, what I was thinking about today was what would make him do that? And this what came to my mind. What if he was told something along these lines, that the truth about the human race is this: we are a genetic experiment of alien birth. I mean, we are their experiment. Think about the impact it would have on religions. Think about the impact that would have on so many faith-based situations. And certainly, as you mentioned, Carter was very religious. So to me, this is something, that piece of information, it's not sinister, but the implications would be much greater if that was the case.
Absolutely. I mean, as I said, you've got to have an open mind to be able to accept all possibilities, and that's quite possible. I would, you've raised my interest on Carter and that one event, and I want to do more research on that.
Oh, goody!
I want to look into that in more depth, because that you've raised a real question mark in my mind, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you are
that.
as interested as I am in that, because that was my question. What would precipitate that type of experience for Carter to go into his office and do that? So, yeah, there's something that we need to know. And certainly that theory, that hypothesis would go along with why they take people, why they abduct people, why they do all of these cattle mutilations, those types of things. It would kind of fit into that, another piece in that puzzle.
You have to, you go back and look at the presidents that had a great interest in UFOs, modern presidents, and you go back to Gerald Ford when he was a congressman from Michigan, and they had a great UFO flap in Michigan, and he wrote a number of letters. One I have a copy of to Mendel Rivers, to have congressional investigations into this UFO phenomenon because of what occurred in his constituents were hammering him to find out what was going on. You had Jimmy Carter that had his own sighting and said when he got into office, he would release all UFO information. You had Ronald Reagan that had sightings. Bill Clinton said that when he got into office, he was going to investigate the UFO issue. You take all these presidents, and once they got into office, you really heard nothing.
That's right.
You heard nothing. And you have to wonder, what shut them down?
Right.
Why did they not talk? Now, Reagan, it's reported that his advisors, or handlers, if you will, had to keep a close watch on Reagan to keep him from saying too much, because he had I think Reagan was really interested in it, and he brought the subject up, and I think Reagan probably knew a lot more than other presidents of in that era, and he wanted to let it out. And his people kind of had to keep the lid on him a bit. But it is interesting that all these presidents that said that had such great interest in it before they got into office, once they got into office, they basically became a clam.
That's right. They acted like they had no more interest in it. So yeah, something had to be shared with them that made them change their opinion about disclosure. Something happened.
Yeah.
So,
who knows someone from the CIA sat down and said, in essence, Mr. President, here's some basic facts. Keep your mouth shut, in a nice way.
Right. Right. And then, again, there's some question, as you mentioned in your book, and you go through some possibilities. Was Kennedy assassinated because he was digging into this and he wasn't backing off?
The Kennedy chapter was the hardest chapter I had to write, and I state that in the book, because I was drawn into conspiracy theory of Kennedy's assassination. And I don't really care who pulled the trigger. I don't care whether it was Lee Harvey Oswald or whether there was a half a dozen people out there that pulled the trigger at the same time. That's not my interest. My interest is what was behind it. What was
Right.
the conspiracy, and was Kennedy's association with certain people, Dr. Menzel, Art Lundahl, a great photo interpretation specialist that was involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis, who, along with Kelly Johnson, were convinced that UFOs were extraterrestrial, and was an advisor to Kennedy. James Jesus Angleton, the very shadowy deputy director of the CIA, head of counterintelligence. All of these people fit into the picture. And Donald Menzel, who was wrote books debunking UFOs, but was said to be a member of the original Majestic 12 group, was an advisor to Kennedy. I've got a letter that I got out of the Kennedy Library from Donald Menzel that addressed the president as Jack, dear Jack. You don't address a sitting president by his first name unless
Right.
you're pretty close to him.
Yeah.
So that's all in the book, and I just say, here's the information. Here's the information on the Byrne memo, as you all read in the book.
Right.
The final tab page of the Byrne memo, which goes into the operation must become wet, which is a code word for assassinations. These are the facts as they exist. Are they true? Can you connect the dots? It's up to you, the reader, to look into this and see if you think these dots are connectable.
Exactly. And again, you present a very compelling case. I don't think anybody could read your book and walk away from it thinking that UFOs do not exist. They obviously do. And I've known this for years. I know, PK, you've known this for years. And it's just that your book is so well done. And you also bring up the Obama administration. And again, they're all full of hot air. Everybody talks a good game till they become president. And then they act disinterested.
Well, Patricia, when I wrote the book, and that's current affairs, and things change. When I wrote the book, I really didn't think Obama knew hardly anything of the UFO issue.
Yes.
However, after he's been on Jimmy Kimmel and he's made the statements that he made on Jimmy Kimmel, I'm starting to reassess that opinion and say that maybe he was briefed more than I thought he was briefed. And when he made the statement, and kind of laughing, but it was a nervous laugh, that they don't let us talk about that.
Uh-huh.
Maybe he's telling the truth.
Yeah.
Maybe they are briefed, and I believe they are to a certain level, but they are told that presidents under security clearance just like everybody else that's in government. They have a security clearance that they're bound to keep their mouth shut about things, and so I think that that Obama may know more than I thought he knew when I wrote the book.
Mm-hmm. It's quite possible, but it sounds like from everybody who wrote about Nixon knew the most, would you say?
I would say that Nixon in the modern era, but I think that probably Truman and Eisenhower were deeply involved in it, mm-hmm. and I think that Nixon, as an offshoot of that, being vice president under Eisenhower for 8 years, I think it comes into that fold too. So Lyndon Johnson, that's a little squirrely, but I think that he was in the mix also. But I think after Nixon, it got what presidents knew was really closely monitored, and their knowledge was stripped or cut back greatly.
Yes, it does seem that way. It sounds like they were much more restricted after Nixon. And so things were not given as freely as they had been in the past to the presidents. So you talk a little bit, too, in your book, Larry, about what we can do to try to get disclosure to happen. I don't know if we're going to be powerful enough as a group to do that. But certainly, as you say in your book, it is important to make your voice heard and send your letters to your representatives and things like that, and make a stink about it, that why are we being kept in the dark? So that is something we can do, yes?
You can talk about it, yes. You should. There's so many people that have sightings that are legitimate people, that are, everyday folks, but they have legitimate sightings, and they should report them. I write about a young lady that was had I think an astounding sighting, and I believe her completely, in California, in Central California, and she had not told anyone about her sighting until my book came out, and my agent put me in contact with her, and we talked about possibilities for my book, but. I found out that she had a sighting that was remarkable, and I put it in the book, but she never reported it. Yeah. And the reason she didn't report it was she thought it would hurt her career. She had a very high-profile job in Hollywood.
That's the thing. That's what people face, unfortunately, and that's not the way it should be. But Larry, we can't thank you enough for coming on the show. This hour and a half went in the blink of an eye. We're going to have you back. There's still a whole bunch of other things we haven't talked about with you, but good luck with your movie. And oh my goodness, thank you so much for writing this great book, everybody. It's The Presidents and UFOs. Be sure to tune in tomorrow night to listen to Renee Barnett's show on Night Vision, the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. And thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you again, Larry, and we will see you all next week for part 2 of the Girl Scout murders. In the meantime, we'll see you on the Blue Highway. Good night.
Thanks much.